Please, sir.
Thank you. Let me begin by joining Yair and all of my colleagues in condemning the horrific terrorist attack last night in Hadara, which killed 2 border police officers, both just 19 years old. On behalf of President Biden, the American people, we extend our heartfelt condolences to the loved ones of the victims, Yazin Falah and Shahril Abu Karat. No family should have to experience such loss. And we stand in absolute solidarity with our friends and partners against terrorism and these horrific acts of violence. And indeed, Yair, as you said, what we are doing here is the exact counterpoint to this senseless destruction and violence. It's an honor to be here with you, with Minister Burita, Minister el-Zayani, Minister Zayid, Minister Shukri, the foreign ministers of Israel, Morocco, Bahrein, the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt, standing together in Israel. Just a few years ago, this gathering would have been impossible to imagine. You mentioned the original Abraham. He had a dialogue with God. He had the temerity sometimes to ask why. We have the temerity, you have the temerity to ask why not. That is what this is about. Since September 15th, 2020, when leaders from Israel, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates signed the Abraham Accords, and Morocco and Israel signed a normalization agreement soon after, once impossible things have become possible. We've seen democracy flourish, with Morocco and Israel agreeing to open embassies in Rabat and Tel Aviv. Prime Minister Bennett becoming the first Israeli Prime Minister to visit Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates. And last week, the leaders of the United Arab Emirates, Israel, and Egypt meeting to launch new areas of cooperation. We've seen growing economic ties, with Bahrain and Israel signing more than a dozen agreements, including on aviation, on banking, on technology. Government and business leaders from Morocco and Israel meeting last week to promote tourism across both countries. A solar energy deal that will accelerate the green energy transition already underway in the region. At the heart of these interactions are people eager to learn about and from one another. Student exchanges are flourishing between Rabat and Tel Aviv. A Holocaust memorial exhibition is now open in Dubai. Hospitals in Bahrain and Israel are teaming up on cancer research. Tomorrow, soccer players or football players from your countries will play in the Abraham Accords Festival and Games at the Dubai Expo, where there's also an Israel pavilion. The Abraham Accords are making the lives of people across your countries more peaceful, more prosperous, more vibrant, more integrated. They're allowing governments to focus their energies and attentions on the issues that are actually affecting the lives of our citizens and making them better. The United States has and will continue to strongly support a process that is transforming this region and beyond. We'll help to strengthen the bonds between Israel and its circle of friends, both those with which it has normalization agreements and those with which it has long-standing peace treaties, like Egypt and Jordan. To name one example, later today, officials from the United States, the UAE, and Israel will launch the Religious Coexistence Working Group to counter intolerance and promote understanding. And will help widen this circle of friendship to include other countries interested in securing greater peace and prosperity for their own people. As we do, we have to be clear that these regional peace agreements are not a substitute for progress between Palestinians and Israelis. One of the issues we discussed today was how countries involved in the Abraham Accords and normalization, as well as those that have long-standing diplomatic relationships with Israel, can support the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian people in concrete ways and have a positive impact on the daily lives of Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. This is a conversation we'll carry forward so that we can work toward our goal of Palestinians and Israelis enjoying equal measures of freedom, security, opportunity, and dignity, and create the conditions for a negotiated two-state solution. Finally, as neighbors, and in the case of the United States, as friends, we will also work together to confront common security challenges and threats, including those from Iran and its proxies. Almost exactly 43 years ago, Israel and Egypt concluded the Camp David Accords. At that time, standing between President Sadat and President Begin, President Carter said this: "We're privileged to witness a significant achievement in the cause of peace, an achievement that none thought possible just a year ago." Well, those were different times. Israel and its neighbors had just fought a war. But that sentiment, that what was believed unchangeable was suddenly transformed, creating a new reality, this is also true today. And as happens whenever you break down barriers that have long kept people from interacting, exchanging ideas, working together, it's impossible to anticipate all the new directions that this can take us. This is a new dawn. The only limits are the ones we can imagine. So, I commend the courage of those willing to break down barriers, political leaders, but also people across our societies, individual citizens who are forging new relationships as a result of this historic opening. I am excited to see all that you and we can imagine and create together for one another, for the region, for the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.